Okay, so let's imagine this. A self-driving car gets into an accident. Who's to blame? Is it the owner who is sitting in the driver's seat? The manufacturer who built the car? Or maybe the programmer who wrote the code? This isn't science fiction anymore. This is a real and really pressing question about moral responsibility in the age of AI. And as we're about to see, finding the answer is way more complicated than you might think.
It seems like it should be a simple question, right? When AI causes harm, who's on the hook? But the problem is, AI is making choices everywhere, from medical diagnoses to who gets a job interview, and these choices have huge real-world consequences. And when things go wrong, when that harm actually happens, those clear lines of accountability we're used to, well, they start to get really blurry. It becomes surprisingly tough to point the finger.
And I want to be clear, this is not some far-off future problem. Nope. The unintended consequences are already happening, and they're causing real-world harm right now. Let's just look at a few examples to see how high the stakes have already become.
Take Amazon's AI recruiting tool. It literally taught itself that resumes with the word women's in them, like Women's Chess Club, were bad, so it started penalizing female applicants. Or think about Google Photos, which had that infamous, horrible incident where it mislabeled black people. And it's even in our justice system, with algorithms showing clear racial bias when predicting whether someone is likely to reoffend. These aren't just little technical glitches. These are failures that can alter the course of someone's life.
So you might be wondering, why can't we just pop the hood on the AI, find the bad line of code, and fix it? Well, the answer lies in the very strange and honestly opaque nature of modern AI. It's a challenge that experts call the black box problem.
To really get this, we have to understand that early AI was what you'd call symbolic. It just followed a bunch of if-then rules that a programmer wrote. But the AI we have today? It's sub-symbolic. Think about how you recognize a friend's face. You don't run through a formal checklist, right? You just know. It's intuitive. Well, this new AI learns in a similar way, by finding its own patterns in absolutely massive amounts of data.
And that leads us right to the critical question. If we didn't give the AI explicit instructions, if we didn't write the rules, then how can we ever really know how it's making its decisions?
And this is the absolute heart of the issue. Even the brilliant engineers who build these systems often can't fully trace the logic. You have millions, maybe billions of calculations happening inside a neural network, and it spits out a result, but the reasoning behind it can be a complete mystery. It's a black box. And that lack of transparency is a massive, massive roadblock when you're trying to figure out accountability.
But hold on, because the complexity isn't just in the code. That's only one piece of the puzzle. To really get why accountability is so tricky, we have to look at the huge, sprawling human network that creates and uses these tools in the first place.
You can think of it like a long relay race of decisions. It kicks off with the algorithm developers, the people creating the core learning model. They pass the baton to software engineers, who build that model into a system we can actually use. Then, data scientists train it on specific data, and this is a really crucial step where all sorts of biases can creep in. After that, a manager has to make the call to actually deploy it. And finally, you have an end user, maybe a doctor or a recruiter, who trusts its output to make a choice that affects another person.
So when that system ends up showing bias, who carries the blame? Is it the original developer for the code, the data scientist for using flawed data, the manager who signed off on it, or the user who just trusted the machine? Answering that question, well, it forces us to step out of technology and into a really deep philosophical debate.
And right at the philosophical core of this entire debate is one powerful concept: agency. Understanding what this means is the absolute key to untangling this whole problem of responsibility.
For, centuries, we've pretty much only applied the idea of moral agency to humans. We believe that people can understand right from wrong, that they can make judgments, and because of that, they can and should be held responsible for what they do. But the huge disruptive question that AI forces us to ask is, can we, or maybe more importantly, should we, apply this same standard to a machine?
Now, to try and solve this puzzle, thinkers have come up with different ways to frame AI's role in our moral world. So let's take a look at 3 of the most influential and pretty different models out there. All right, let's break this down. First up, you've got Luciano Floridi. He calls AI a moral agent because its actions do have moral consequences. But, and this is a big but, he says it's not responsible because it doesn't have any intent. Then you have Deborah Johnson, who takes a much harder line. She says AI is just a tool, a causal agent, and that all moral responsibility stays with us, the humans, period. And finally, there's Peter Paul Verbeek, who suggests a kind of middle path. He sees a hybrid agent, where humans and AI work together like a team, and the responsibility becomes this messy, shared, joint product of that team. Now, as interesting as these models sound, they all risk creating a really dangerous loophole, something we can call the responsibility gap. Because it turns out the language we use to talk about AI and agency has very real-world risks.
And here's the core argument against these ways of thinking. Trying to apply our human concept of moral agency to what is, at the end of the day, a computer program is not just unnecessary, it's actually risky. It just muddies the waters right when we need the most clarity.
So why is it so risky? Well, let's look at them again. Floridi's model, it creates this weird thing called a moral agent that can't actually be held responsible. That just becomes an easy way for human actors to get off the hook. Verbeek's joint product idea sounds nice and collaborative, but if everyone is a little bit responsible, it can easily mean that no one single person is truly accountable. And even Johnson's model, which is better because it keeps responsibility with humans, gets criticized for using the word agency for a tool at all, because it can be a confusing distraction from what really matters: human choices and human intentions.
So, after all that, here is the crucial takeaway. This is the big one. We have to maintain a crystal clear distinction. Machines cause effects. Their actions have an impact on the world, and that impact can have moral weight. But responsibility, which requires intent and judgment and choice, that must remain firmly and exclusively with the human beings who build, deploy, and use them.
And that leaves us all with a final and pretty vital question. As this technology gets more and more powerful, more autonomous, the easy path will always be to blur these lines, to treat AI like a partner, or maybe even a scapegoat. The much harder path is the human one. Are we, as its creators, truly prepared to take full responsibility for what we unleash on the world?